Stick to mopping, girl.
Tanya stopped, looked him dead in the eye.
That's all your kind is good for.
Derek Voss stepped closer.
Excuse me?
Did I stutter?
Every word on that board? Tanya understood it perfectly. Heather Collins nearly spit out her coffee laughing. Tanya said nothing.
Go on.
Gripped her mop, turned away. What Derek didn't know? That woman he just humiliated would soon be the only person who could save his career. Every night at 11:42, Tanya Brooks pushed her cleaning cart onto the 38th floor of Alderton and Voss Consulting. Downtown Chicago, glass walls, skyline views that cost more per square foot than her apartment cost per year. The fluorescent lights hummed, the smell of lemon disinfectant mixed with stale coffee, and that one left wheel on her cart. It squeaked every single night. Same wheel, same sound, like a tiny reminder that nothing in her life had been fixed yet. But Tanya wasn't just cleaning. See, every night after the executives went home, the conference room whiteboards stayed up. Deal terms, financial projections, notes from meetings about the firm's biggest contract, a $50 million infrastructure deal with a Chinese company called Jiaxing Pacific Industries. All written in Mandarin. And every night, Tanya read them. Every word. She'd been following this deal for weeks, not because anyone asked her to, but because she could. One night, she paused at a whiteboard. One of the characters was written wrong. A small mistake. Wrong stroke order. She breathed on the glass and traced the correct character with her fingertip, then wiped it away before anyone could see. A private act. A quiet flex that nobody would ever know about. Except someone did. Ray Underwood, night security, 50-something black man who'd known Tanya for 2 years. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, shaking his head. "Tanya, you gotta stop hiding." She shrugged. "Nobody's asking, Ray. Because nobody knows." One person knew. Tanya pushed her cart toward the door. "Remember when you told that office manager I speak Mandarin?" Ray winced. "Yeah." She laughed in your face, said, and I quote, "The janitor speaks Mandarin? Right, and I'm the Queen of England." Ray went quiet, because it was true. He'd tried, and it had backfired. Tanya rolled her cart into the hallway. That left wheel squeaked against the marble floor. "It's fine, Ray. I'm not here to prove anything to anyone." But here's the thing. In just a few days, proving herself wouldn't be optional, because a deal worth $50 million was about to fall apart, and she'd be the only one who could hear it dying. 4 days before the big meeting, past midnight. The 38th floor was dead quiet, just the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of a vacuum 2 floors down. Tanya was finishing up the executive hallway when she heard it. A voice, stressed, almost panicking. A junior analyst, young guy, maybe 25, sitting alone in a glass office, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear. He was trying to read a Mandarin email from Jiaxing Pacific's assistant, running it through an online translator, getting nonsense. "This makes no sense," he muttered. "The chicken of infrastructure wishes to dance with your proposal? What does that even mean?" He didn't see Tanya. Nobody ever did. She pushed her cart past his door. Slow. She glanced at his screen. Just a glance. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then she stopped. She didn't plan to say anything. She never did. But the words came out before she could catch them. "They're asking if the timeline can be moved up to Q3, and they want the environmental compliance section expanded." Dead silence. The analyst looked up, blinked, stared at her like she'd just spoken to him from another planet. "What?" Tanya caught herself, pulled back, gripped her mop handle tighter. "Sorry, I saw the characters on your screen, that's what it says." The analyst didn't move, didn't breathe. Then he grabbed his phone and opened a real translation app, a professional one. Word by word, he checked what she'd said. She was right. Not just technically right, she'd caught the tone, the business context, the urgency hidden between the lines, things a machine could never pick up. He looked up again. She was already walking away, cart squeaking down the hallway. "Wait!" he called after her. How do you— But she was gone. Around the corner, into the elevator, the doors closed. Tanya stood alone. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out a small book, old, worn, cracked spine held together with tape, a Mandarin phrase book, her grandmother's. She opened it to the inside cover, handwritten in blue ink in her grandmother's careful script. Every language is a door, baby girl. Tanya ran her thumb across the words. Then she closed the book and put it back in her pocket. Upstairs, the analyst sat frozen at his desk. He stared at his screen, then at the hallway, then back at the screen. He didn't tell anyone that night. He didn't know what to say. How do you explain that the cleaning lady just translated a business email that a professional interpreter would charge $200 for, and she did it in 3 seconds flat? He couldn't explain it, so he said nothing. But the audience knows, and that changes everything. Because now you're holding a secret. You know something that every executive in that building doesn't. You know that the most valuable person at Alderton and Voss doesn't have an office. She has a mop. And that gap between what you know and what they know, that's what's going to make the next part so hard to watch. Back in the elevator, Tanya watched the floor numbers drop. 38, 37, 36. She didn't feel proud, she felt tired. 2 jobs, 6 days a week, studying on the train between shifts, always a book in her bag, always another language to sharpen. Not for a promotion, not for a corner office, just because her grandmother told her the world was bigger than the block she grew up on. And Tanya believed her. The elevator hit the ground floor. The doors opened. Cold Chicago air rushed in. Tanya pulled her jacket tight and walked into the night. Tomorrow she'd be back. Same cart, same squeaky wheel, same invisibility. But not for long. To understand Tanya Brooks, you have to go back, way back, to a porch in Englewood, south side of Chicago. She was 14, sitting on the front steps with her grandmother Lorraine, a retired schoolteacher who never left the country, never owned a passport, but somehow collected language textbooks from every thrift store within 20 miles. French, Portuguese, German, Mandarin. Stacked on shelves in a tiny apartment that smelled like lavender and old paper. Lorraine had a saying. She said it so often Tanya could hear it in her sleep. They'll decide what you are before you open your mouth, so when you do open it, make sure they don't have a category for you. Tanya learned French first. Lorraine spoke some from her own school days. Then Portuguese, picked up from a neighbor down the hall. Then came Mandarin, the hardest one. She started at 16 with library books and free videos online. By 19, she was watching Chinese news broadcasts for fun. For fun. She was good, scary good. The kind of good that should have gone somewhere. And it almost did. A linguistics professor at the University of Illinois noticed her, recommended her for a full scholarship. Tanya filled out the application, got the interview, bought a new blouse from Goodwill just for the occasion. Then Lorraine got sick. Not a little sick. The kind of sick that needs someone home around the clock. Tanya dropped the application, dropped everything, moved back to the apartment on 63rd Street and took care of her grandmother full-time. She never complained. Not once. Lorraine passed 2 years ago, quietly, in her sleep, holding Tanya's hand. The only thing Tanya kept was the phrase book, that worn little Mandarin book with the cracked spine and blue ink on the inside cover. Every language is a door, baby girl. Now Tanya works 2 jobs. Janitor at Alderton and Voss from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. Cashier at a grocery store from noon to 6. She studies languages on the train between shifts. Always a book in her bag. Always. She didn't learn Mandarin for a career. She learned it because her grandmother told her the world was bigger than one block. And she believed her. 2 days before the big meeting, Tanya was pulling a rare day shift, covering for a sick colleague. She wasn't used to seeing the 38th floor in daylight. Everything looked different, sharper, louder, people everywhere, phones ringing, coffee machines hissing. She was cleaning the executive hallway when she heard voices through an open door. A prep session for the Jiaxing Pacific meeting. 4 people around a table. Pamela Garrett, the firm's hired Mandarin interpreter, was rehearsing talking points. Tanya slowed down. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but she couldn't help it. Pamela was good, technically. Her pronunciation was clean, grammar was tight, but something was off. Tanya heard it immediately. Pamela used a word for partnership that was formal, textbook correct. But in real business conversation, especially with someone from Shanghai, that word carried distance, coldness. It was the kind of word you'd use with a stranger you didn't trust, not a partner you wanted to build with. The right word was warmer, more personal. A small difference on paper, a massive difference in that room. Tanya knew this. She felt it in her gut. But she kept mopping, kept her head down, because who was she to say anything? Then Grant Alderton walked down the hall. He saw her, and unlike every other executive on that floor, he stopped. "Afternoon, Tanya. How's the new floor wax working out?" He knew her name. He always did. That small thing, just hearing her own name from someone with power, gave her enough courage to open her mouth. "Mr. Alderton, I don't mean to overstep." She paused, chose her words carefully. "But the word Ms. Garrett is using for partnership, it might land wrong with the Chinese delegation. There's a warmer version, more personal. It would feel less like a contract and more like a relationship." Grant looked at her, not with shock, not with confusion, with something else, recognition, like he was seeing something he'd quietly suspected for a long time. Before he could respond, Derek Voss appeared from the conference room. "Grant, we need you in here." Then he spotted Tanya, looked her up and down. Uniform, mop, bucket. "Can someone get the cleaning crew out of the executive wing? We're trying to prep a $50 million deal here." Tanya stepped back, eyes down. She rolled her cart toward the elevator. Grant watched her go. His face was unreadable, but something was turning behind his eyes. That night, Tanya came back for her regular shift. Same floor, same routine. She walked into the conference room to clean. And she stopped. The whiteboard. The talking points for the Jiaxing meeting. One word had been changed. The formal word for partnership was gone, replaced with the warmer one, the exact word Tanya had suggested. No note, no thank you, no credit, just a quiet correction on a whiteboard that nobody would ever trace back to her. Tanya stood in front of that board for a long time. The fluorescent light buzzed above her. The building was empty. The city glowed through the glass. She didn't smile, but something shifted in her chest. A tiny crack in the wall she'd built around herself. The smallest proof that someone had actually listened. She picked up her rag and started wiping down the table. But here's what stayed with me. Grant Alderton heard a janitor correct his professional interpreter. And instead of laughing, instead of ignoring it, he changed the word. The question now was simple. Would he remember her when it really mattered? The day before the meeting. The whole floor was buzzing. People walked faster, talked louder. The Jiaxing Pacific deal was the biggest contract Alderton and Voss had chased in 5 years. $50 million. If they closed it, bonuses for everyone. If they didn't, heads would roll. And right in the middle of all that pressure, something small happened. Something that should have changed everything, but didn't. The junior analyst, the one from that midnight hallway, finally said something. He pulled Heather Collins aside near the coffee station. Heather was a senior associate, Derek's right hand. Sharp suits, perfect hair, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "This is going to sound strange," he said. But the other night, the janitor, Tanya, she translated a Mandarin email on the spot. Perfectly. Like better than any app I've ever used. Heather stirred her coffee, slow, took a sip. "That's cute." She smiled that tight smile. "But we have a professional interpreter for a reason. Let's not turn this into a diversity moment, okay?" She walked away. Didn't ask a single follow-up question. Didn't check. Didn't care. And that was worse than cruelty. Because cruelty at least acknowledges you exist. What Heather did was erasure. She made Tanya disappear without even raising her voice. The analyst stood there, coffee in hand, mouth open. He wanted to push back. He didn't. He went back to his desk and said nothing. Meanwhile, 2 floors up, Derek Voss was in his office, door closed, standing in front of a mirror, practicing Mandarin greetings from a YouTube tutorial he'd watched over lunch. 3 phrases, that's all he'd learned, and he was butchering every single one. Wrong tones, wrong rhythm. Sounded like a man reading a menu he didn't understand. But he didn't know that. He thought he sounded impressive. Think about that for a second. A man who learned 3 phrases to perform competence, and a woman who learned an entire language out of love. Same building, same deal, completely different worlds. That evening, Tanya was finishing her shift. She was mopping the hallway near the elevators when Derek walked out of his office. Late night, suit jacket over his shoulder. He saw her, looked at the floor, then at her. He was holding a coffee cup, half full. He looked Tanya right in the eye and dropped it. Just opened his hand and let it fall. Coffee splashed across the floor she'd just finished mopping. Brown liquid spreading across clean marble. "Earn your paycheck," he said, and walked to the elevator. He didn't look back. Tanya stared at the puddle. Her hand was shaking, not from weakness, from everything she was holding back. She cleaned it up. Of course she did. That's what she always did. Later, Ray found her in the basement break room, sitting alone, hands wrapped around a cup of water, quiet. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said something Ray would remember for a long time. "My grandma used to say, silence isn't weakness, it's loading." She looked up at him. "I'm just loading, Ray." Ray sat down across from her. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. He'd known Tanya long enough to understand what that look in her eyes meant. Something was building, and what she was about to unload would change everything on the 38th floor of Alderton and Voss. Every single person who laughed, who ignored, who dropped coffee on a clean floor. They had no idea what was coming. The day arrived, 9 o'clock sharp. The 38th floor looked like a magazine cover, fresh flowers on every table, branded folders at every seat, bottled water with the Alderton and Voss logo, everything polished, everything perfect. The elevator doors opened. Mr. Jiang Wei stepped out, CEO of Jiaxing Pacific Industries, mid-60s, gray suit, calm face, the kind of man who doesn't need to raise his voice because the room already knows he's in charge. Behind him, 4 members of his team, all quiet, all watching. Grant Alderton greeted them at the door, warm handshake, gracious smile. The meeting began. For the first 30 minutes, things went fine. Pamela Garrett translated. Grant spoke about the firm's track record. The Chinese delegation nodded politely. Then the cracks appeared. Mr. Jiang used a well-known Chinese proverb. It roughly means, first become friends, then do business. He was sending a signal, a clear one. The relationship feels too transactional. I want warmth. I want to feel respected, not pitched to. Pamela translated it word for word, literally. She caught the language, missed the meaning completely. Derek didn't notice. He launched into a PowerPoint, slide after slide of numbers, ROI projections, growth charts. He talked at Jiang like he was selling a used car. Jiang's expression cooled. His deputy shifted in his seat. Second mistake. Jiang made a subtle joke to his deputy. A clever wordplay that doubled as a test, to see if anyone on this side of the table truly understood his language, his culture, his way of thinking. Pamela caught the words, missed the wit, translated it flat. The moment of connection died on the table. Jiang's eyes narrowed, just slightly, but enough. Then came the third mistake, the fatal one. Jiang raised a concern about environmental compliance in the infrastructure plan. He phrased it carefully, politely. But in his business culture, the way he said it was an ultimatum, not a suggestion. He was saying, fix this now or I walk. Pamela translated it as a casual remark, something to revisit later. Derek waved his hand. We can address that down the road. Jiang's jaw tightened. His deputy closed his folder. A small gesture, but in that room, it was a death sentence. The deal was dying, right there, in real time. And nobody at Alderton and Voss could see it. Nobody except one person, Tanya Brooks. She was on the 38th floor that day. Emergency call, a pipe leak in the supply closet. She'd come up to mop the water, and now she was in the hallway wringing out her mop right outside the conference room. The door was open, just 6 inches, but 6 inches was enough. She heard everything. She heard Zhang's proverb and knew it was a plea for connection. She heard the joke and knew it was a test. She heard the ultimatum and knew, with absolute certainty, that Pamela had mistranslated it. She looked through the gap. She saw Zhang's face, hard, closed, done. Tanya's heart was pounding. Her hands were still wet from the mop. She was standing in a puddle of pipe water in a custodial uniform. And she knew. She knew this $50 million deal was bleeding out on that conference table. The only person in the entire building who could stop the bleeding was standing in the hallway, holding a mop, wearing a name badge that said custodial staff. And nobody, not one single person, knew she was there. The meeting broke for 15 minutes. Zhang and his team stepped into a private room. The door closed behind them. Not a good sign. Back in the conference room, quiet panic. Derek was red in the face. Pamela was flipping through her notes, flustered. The junior analyst stared at the table. Everyone could feel it slipping. Nobody knew how to stop it. Grant Alderton stood up, said nothing to his team, just walked out into the hallway. He needed air. He needed to think. Something was wrong with this meeting, and he could feel it in his bones, but he couldn't pinpoint what. He didn't speak Mandarin. He only spoke people, and the people on the other side of that table were shutting down. Then he saw her, Tanya, standing by her cart, mop in one hand, the other hand gripping the handle so tight her knuckles had gone pale. She was staring at the conference room door, and the look on her face, it wasn't the look of someone who was cleaning, it was the look of someone who knew. Grant walked toward her, slowly. He stopped 3 feet away. Tanya. His voice was low, calm. You heard what's happening in there, didn't you? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved to the floor, then back to him. Yes, sir. Tell me. She took a breath, then spoke, quiet but steady. Mr. Alderton, he gave you an ultimatum, not a suggestion. Ms. Garrett translated it soft, but he's saying if you don't address the environmental section right now, today, he's walking. And there's more. He's offended. The whole presentation feels like a sales pitch. He doesn't want to be sold to. He wants a relationship. He wants to feel like you see him as an equal, not a customer. Grant was silent. The hallway was empty, just the two of them. The hum of the building, the faint squeak of Tanya's cartwheel settling on the marble. He looked at her, then at the conference room door, then back at her. How long have you spoken Mandarin? Since I was 16, sir. A long pause. Grant Alderton had built a consulting empire on one skill, knowing when someone in the room was the smartest person there. He was looking at that person right now, and she was wearing a custodial uniform. He turned toward the conference room, took 2 steps, then stopped. He reached back and held the door open. Come in with me. Tanya didn't move. She looked down at herself. The uniform. The wet shoes, the name badge clipped to her chest. Custodial staff. She was still holding a mop. Mr. Alderton, I can't just... Leave the mop, he said it simply, like it was the easiest thing in the world. Bring yourself. 5 words, that's all it took. Leave the mop. Bring yourself. Tanya set the mop against the wall. It slid slightly, then held. She straightened her badge. She didn't take it off. She would walk into that room as exactly who she was. She stepped forward. Grant held the door. They didn't go in right away. Tanya made it 3 steps toward the conference room and stopped. Her hands were shaking, not a little, visibly. She pressed them flat against her sides to hide it. Grant noticed. He didn't rush her, didn't say hurry up, didn't check his watch. He just stopped walking and turned around. Talk to me, he said. I'm a janitor, Mr. Alderton. Her voice cracked on the word. I clean your floors. I empty your trash. I mop up coffee that people throw on the ground for fun. How am I supposed to walk into that room and sit across from a man who runs $1 billion company? Grant leaned against the wall, crossed his arms. Not defensive, thoughtful. My father was a bricklayer, he said. 40 years, bad knees, broken hands. He built half the buildings on Michigan Avenue and never owned a single one. But he used to say something that stuck with me. Tanya looked at him. He said, the building doesn't care who lays the bricks, only that they're straight. He let that sit for a moment. You know this deal better than anyone in that room. I've seen your fingerprints on it for weeks. Tanya blinked. You saw me? At the whiteboard? First week. Grant nodded slowly. I came back to the office one night to grab my briefcase. Saw you standing in front of that board, reading every word. I watched you for a full minute before you noticed the hallway light. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was waiting for you to say something first. I was starting to think you never would. Silence. The hallway felt smaller now, closer, like the building itself had leaned in to listen. Tanya reached into her back pocket, pulled out the phrase book, held it in both hands. She ran her thumb across the cover, felt the cracked spine, the tape holding it together. She opened it, looked at the inscription one more time. Her grandmother's handwriting, blue ink, slightly faded. Every language is a door, baby girl. She closed the book, put it back in her pocket. She didn't need it. She never really did. That book was never a tool. It was a hand on her shoulder, a voice saying, you're ready, even when you don't feel like it. Tanya straightened her uniform, smoothed the front of her shirt, touched her name badge one more time. Custodial staff. She left it on. She looked at Grant, nodded once. Okay. Grant turned and opened the conference room door. Light poured into the hallway. Tanya Brooks walked in. Every head in the room turned. Derek saw her first. His face went rigid. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, like he wanted to say something but his brain couldn't find the words fast enough. Heather's pen stopped moving, mid-sentence, just froze on the page. The junior analyst, the one who'd watched Tanya translate that email at midnight, looked up from his laptop. His eyes went wide. He knew. He was the only one in that room who already knew what she was capable of. And Mr. Zhang. He looked at Tanya, saw the uniform, the name badge, the wet spots on her shoes from the pipe water. His expression didn't shift to pity or confusion. It shifted to curiosity. Genuine curiosity. The kind that says, this is unexpected. Tell me more. Derek leaned toward Grant, hissing, barely keeping his voice down. Grant, what is this? We're in the middle of a $50 million... Sit down, Derek. 2 words. No volume, no anger, just authority. The kind you don't argue with. Derek sat. Grant placed his hand on Tanya's shoulder for one brief second. Then he addressed the room. This is Tanya Brooks. She's going to help us communicate more clearly. That was it. No long introduction, no backstory, no explanation of why a janitor was standing in the most important meeting of the year. Just her name and her purpose. Tanya stepped forward. Her heart was slamming against her ribs. She could feel every eye in the room on her skin. Somewhere behind her, she heard it. That familiar squeak. Someone in the hallway had bumped her cart. That same left wheel. The sound followed her everywhere, even here. She took a breath, and then she spoke. She addressed Mr. Zhang directly, not through Pamela, not through Grant, directly. She spoke in flawless, warm, natural Mandarin, not textbook, not robotic, the kind of Mandarin that sounds like home. She used the proper honorific for a man of his age and position. She referenced the proverb he'd used earlier, first become friends, then do business. And she said, in his language, with full cultural precision, Mr. Zhang, we heard you. We want to be friends first. We should have started there, and I'm sorry we didn't. The room went completely still. Zhang's eyes softened. His deputy, who hadn't uncrossed his arms in an hour, leaned forward. Something in the air had changed, like a window had been opened in a room that had been sealed shut. Derek shifted in his chair, His cufflinks caught the overhead light. Heather stared at the table. Tanya kept going. She didn't just translate the firm's position, she understood the underlying worry. She addressed Zhang's environmental compliance concern directly. She explained that the firm could restructure a key section of the proposal to meet Chinese regulatory standards. She suggested a joint review committee, shared oversight, shared responsibility. The phrase she used for shared responsibility was deliberate. In Chinese business culture, it carries deep weight. It means, we trust you, and we're asking you to trust us back. Not as a transaction, as a partnership. Pamela Garrett sat motionless, her notes untouched. She was watching Tanya like someone watching a surgeon perform an operation she'd only ever read about. Then Zhang tested her. He asked a follow-up question, fast, technical, about infrastructure zoning in the proposal. He spoke quickly, with the regional accent of a man from Shanghai. No slowing down, no courtesy. Tanya answered without hesitation, clearly, precisely, like she'd written the proposal herself. Zhang's deputy glanced at his boss, a small look, but it said everything. Then Zhang asked a second question. This one wasn't about business. Where did you learn to speak like this? Who taught you? The room held its breath. Tanya paused. For the first time since she'd walked in, her voice softened. My grandmother. She was a school teacher on the south side of Chicago. She never left the country. But she believed every language is a door. She gave me the key to yours. Zhang didn't respond right away. He just looked at her. Really looked. Not at the badge, not at the uniform. At her. Then he smiled. The first genuine smile he'd shown all day. Not polite, not diplomatic, real. He turned to his deputy and said something quiet. Just a few words. Tanya translated it for the room, all of it, including the part about herself. He said, "This is the person we should have been talking to from the beginning." Derek's face drained of color. Heather's pen rolled off the table. Nobody picked it up. Then Mr. Zhang did something nobody expected. He turned to Grant Alderton, and he spoke in English. Clear, careful English. He'd understood it this whole time. He'd been choosing to speak Mandarin, not because he couldn't speak English, but as a test. A test of respect. A test to see if anyone on this side of the table cared enough to truly understand him. Nobody had passed. Until now. Mr. Alderton, Zhang said, I came here to cancel this deal. The room stopped breathing. Your team did not hear us. Your presentation was numbers without soul. I was ready to fly home tonight. He paused, looked at Tanya. But she heard us. She spoke to us. Not at us. Not through a script. She understood what we actually needed. He nodded once. We will stay. We will sign. But I have one condition. Grant leaned forward. Name it. I want her at every meeting, every call, every negotiation. Her, not anyone else. Silence. The junior analyst had tears in his eyes. He was the one who'd seen it first. That midnight in the hallway. He'd known. And he'd said nothing. That weight was sitting on his chest right now, and everyone in the room could see it. Derek Voss stared at the table. His jaw was locked. His hands were flat on the surface. The man who told Tanya to stick to mopping was now watching her save the very deal he almost destroyed. Tanya stood at the center of that conference room, custodial badge still pinned to her chest, pipe water still drying on her shoes, grandmother's phrase book still in her back pocket. $50 million, saved by the woman with the mop, and she was just getting started. The meeting resumed. But everything was different now. Tanya wasn't standing anymore. She was sitting. At the table. Between Grant Alderton and Mr. Zhang. A chair that 15 minutes ago didn't exist for her. Someone had pulled it from the corner of the room. The junior analyst. Quietly. Without being asked. For the next 90 minutes, Tanya didn't just translate. She mediated. She caught cultural subtleties that Pamela would have missed. She reframed proposals in ways that made both sides feel heard. She smoothed tensions before they became problems. She turned a dying conversation into a living one. At one point, Zhang made a reference to a Chinese concept about long-term trust. It had no clean English equivalent. Pamela would have fumbled it. Tanya didn't just translate the idea. She explained it, gave it context, made the Alderton and Voss team understand not just the words, but the weight behind them. Grant watched her work. He didn't interrupt, didn't redirect. He just watched a woman do something extraordinary and had the wisdom to stay out of her way. Derek sat at the far end of the table, silent. For 90 straight minutes, the man who never stopped talking didn't say a single word. His cufflinks caught the light every time he shifted in his chair. Those flashy, expensive cufflinks. They used to make him look powerful. Now they just looked like costume jewelry on a man who'd been exposed. The deal was signed at 4:17 in the afternoon. $50 million. Infrastructure consulting. A partnership between Alderton and Voss and Jiaxing Pacific Industries. The biggest contract in the firm's history. Mr. Zhang stood. He shook hands around the table. But the first hand he reached for was Tanya's. Not Grant's, not Derek's, not Pamela's. Tanya's. He held her hand with both of his, looked her in the eye, and said in English, "Thank you for hearing us." 3 words that carried more weight than $50 million. The conference room doors opened. Word had already spread through the floor. People were gathered in the hallway. Associates, analysts, admin staff. They'd heard bits and pieces, whispers moving through the building like electricity. The janitor, the deal, the Mandarin. Tanya stepped into that hallway, still in her uniform, still wearing the badge. The junior analyst was the first to approach. He walked straight to her. His eyes were red. He stood in front of her for a moment, searching for words. Then he said it. "I should have said something sooner. That night in the hallway, I knew, and I didn't speak up. I'm sorry." Tanya looked at him. She could have been angry. She had every right. Instead, she nodded. "You're saying it now. That counts." Others came forward, not with pity, with respect. An admin assistant asked her, "How many languages do you speak?" Tanya almost smiled. 4.5. My German's still rough." Quiet laughter. A human moment in the middle of something enormous. The next morning, Tanya came to the 38th floor, not for her cleaning shift. Grant Alderton had asked her to come to his office. She showed up in her custodial uniform. She didn't own anything else appropriate, and she wasn't going to pretend to be someone she wasn't. Grant's office was warm. Wood shelves, old books, that same chipped coffee mug on his desk. Behind him, a glass shelf with personal items, a photo of his parents, his law degree, and in the center, a worn, rust-colored trowel, his father's, the first tool the man ever used on a job site. "Sit down, Tanya." She sat, hands in her lap, heart hammering. "I'm offering you a position. Client liaison for our Asia-Pacific division. Full salary, full benefits, an office on this floor." He paused. "You've earned it, several times over." Tanya opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Alderton, I don't have a degree. I don't have—" "You have something no degree gives. You have the ability to walk into a room and make people feel understood. That's not a skill you learn in a classroom. That's a gift." He stood up, walked to her side of the desk, and then he did something she would never forget. He took her custodial name badge, the one she'd refused to take off, and placed it inside a glass frame. Then he set it on the shelf, right next to his father's trowel. "My father's first tool," he said. "Your last badge. Both proof that where you start isn't where you finish." Tanya stared at that shelf, the trowel and the badge, side by side. She couldn't speak. Her throat was locked, her eyes burned. She pressed her lips together hard. Then she laughed. Soft, almost to herself. "Can I bring my cart? That left wheel squeaks, but I'm kind of attached to it." Grant laughed. The first real laugh in this entire story. A warm sound in a warm room. Later that day, Derek Voss was called into Grant's office. The conversation was short, private, but the result was public. Derek was reassigned, not fired, demoted, moved to a regional support role 3 levels below his current position. Grant told him one thing. "You threw trash at the person who saved this firm. That's not a mistake, Derek. That's a character problem." Derek packed his corner office that afternoon. Heather watched from down the hall. Neither of them spoke. One more thing happened before the week ended. A package arrived at the firm, addressed to Tanya Brooks, Client Liaison, Asia Pacific Division, from Shanghai. Inside was a calligraphy set, beautiful, traditional, and a handwritten note from Mr. Zhang, in Mandarin. Translated, it read, "A door was opened not by a key, but by a heart that refused to stop learning." Tanya placed it on her new desk, right next to her grandmother's phrasebook. 6 months later, Tanya had facilitated 3 more international contracts. She started a language program for night shift workers at the firm, free, on her own time. 2 of her students were learning Mandarin. 1 was learning French. The firm's revenue from Asia-Pacific partnerships grew 40%. Tanya's name appeared in the annual report, under Key Personnel. And the junior analyst? He now introduces himself to every custodial staff member in the building, by name, every single one. Some things change one person. Some things change a culture. Tanya Brooks changed both. Late at night, the 38th floor, old habits. Tanya Brooks sat alone in her new office, the one with her name on the door, the one she still couldn't believe was real. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, but Tanya stayed. Not because she had work to finish, because this was her time. It had always been her time. The quiet hours, when the city glowed through the glass and the building breathed slow. She looked out the window. The same window she used to clean with a rag and a spray bottle. Same skyline. Same river bending through downtown Chicago. Same view. But everything was different now. On her desk, 3 objects. The calligraphy set from Mr. Zhang, the worn Mandarin phrasebook with the cracked spine, and a framed photo she'd brought from home. Lorraine, smiling, standing on that porch in Englewood, hands on her hips, looking like a woman who already knew her granddaughter would end up exactly here. Tanya opened the phrasebook. She didn't need to look anything up. She just wanted to feel the pages, smell the old paper, see the blue ink. "Every language is a door, baby girl." She whispered it, quietly, to no one, to everyone. "I found the door, Grandma." She closed the book, set it down gently, leaned back in her chair. 1 floor up, through the glass interior wall, she could see Grant Alderton's shelf, the trowel and the badge, side by side. 2 beginnings that became something more. 3 objects on her desk, 2 objects on his shelf. 5 small things that told the entire story of a life that refused to be defined by a mop. And that brings me to you. Tomorrow, wherever you go, whatever building you walk into, I want you to try something. Look at the person cleaning the floor, the one emptying the trash, the one restocking the shelves at the back of the store, the one everyone walks past like they're part of the furniture. You don't know their story. You don't know what languages they speak, what degrees they almost finished, what dreams they carry in their back pocket, what books they read on the train between their first job and their second. You don't know, because you never asked. So maybe ask. A name, a question, a moment of eye contact that says, "I see you. You're not invisible, not to me." That costs you nothing. But for someone like Tanya, it might cost everything. Because sometimes the difference between staying silent forever and finally speaking up is one person who bothered to listen. And if you're the person holding the mop right now, if you're the one being looked through, talked over, dismissed before you even open your mouth, hear me. Your title is not your ceiling. Your circumstance is not your capacity. Your paycheck does not define your potential. Keep loading. One more thing. Some companies have started something called hidden talent audits, anonymous skill assessments for every employee, not just the ones in corner offices, every single person. Janitors, security guards, cafeteria workers, everyone. Imagine that. Imagine if every person in every building got the same talent review as a vice president. Imagine what we'd find. Imagine who we'd find. Maybe the next Tanya Brooks is mopping a floor right now. In your building. On your block. Maybe she's waiting for someone to open the door. Maybe that someone is you. If this story moved you, If you've ever been the person with the mop, drop a comment. Tell me your story. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it. Send it to them. Because sometimes a story is the door. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and remember, your job title is a name tag. Your talent is your name.
$50 million saved by the woman with the mop. Bet still on. No apologies. Tanya didn't win by becoming someone else. She won by finally being seen as who she always was. Her grandmother never left the country, but she put a Mandarin phrase book in her granddaughter's hands and said, "Every language is a door, baby girl." And Tanya spent 15 years quietly opening doors nobody knew existed. Derek learned 3 phrases off YouTube to perform competence. Tanya learned an entire language out of love. Same building, same deal. And when that deal was dying, it wasn't the man in the corner office who saved it. It was the woman he told to stick to mopping. That's the thing about talent. You can ignore it, you can dismiss it, but you cannot stop it from showing up. How many Tanyas have you walked past without ever asking their name? And if you're the one being looked for right now, keep loading. Your title is not your selling. Ever been underestimated because of what you looked like? Drop your story below. Like, subscribe, share this with someone who needs it. Your job title is a name tag. Your talent is your name.